Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Fitness Education Series produced by the Australian Fitness Academy. It's like progressive overload for your brain. I'm your host, Tom Rock, and in today's episode, I'm going to talk about training considerations for strength development. And I think this is a fun topic, definitely one to consider in terms of training goals and potentially your goals or clients' goals in terms of wanting to improve their strength. I think it's an important concept to understand and to apply to our training goals in a thoughtful way, because strength is a common goal to improve strength, but I think it's important to define what the client means in terms of improving strength, and then putting it into context in terms of the client's training age and what they want to do with that strength. So I think there's definitely a continuum of what people perceive as strength as a training goal. So maybe a general beginner or someone who hasn't really been to the gym before wants to get stronger. Generally, that probably means a different thing to someone who's been training for 5 or 6 years and goes, okay, now I really want to improve my strength and build my strength in potentially certain lifts such as the deadlift or bench press or back squat to develop maximal strength, I guess. Whereas the initial client, the beginner, is probably more considering general strength and how do I get stronger in general. And while they're sort of similar goals, both clients want to get stronger, how we apply training and resistance training is probably going to be slightly different and should be, just the way we individualize programming for each client. But strength training brings a higher degree of sort of nuance, I guess, depending on where that client is at. So if a client who has been training for 5 to 6 to 7 years says, I want to develop strength, I'm going to give them their program's going to look a lot different to someone who's been training maybe 2 or 3 months and goes, okay, I really want to get stronger now, and I want to focus on strength. Both have said the same goal, but their programs are going to look vastly different. And I think that's where strength potentially differs a little bit compared to, say, hypertrophy, where their programs are probably different based on preferences and training age and different individualized factors. But it's probably going to be more similar than, say, the strength programs would look. Strength is probably different to hypertrophy, as in strength also has a neural component to it, whereas hypertrophy, we're talking about increasing muscle size. So that's really our muscle mass is just trying to increase our muscle mass. When we look at strength, we've got to look at, well, how do we actually get stronger? And a lot of the time it's going to involve hypertrophy. So it's going to look at, well, how big the cross-sectional area of a muscle is, how much force can this muscle actually create. And generally a bigger muscle is going to have the ability to create more force, which is going to equal more strength. But strength also has a neural component. So how well do our muscles activate? How well can I activate my high threshold motor units? What's my muscular coordination like in terms of, am I activating the whole muscle at the right time? Am I turning off the antagonist at the same time so I can maximize the force I'm outputting? Rate coding, all sorts of things. So as we develop our strength and practice it and train it, we also train our nervous system and the neural components of our body to better activate the muscles to be able to apply more force. But there is definitely a limit to that as well. So at some stage, we're going to have to actually get bigger muscles to get stronger as well. And that's going to make a difference. So there's sort of two aspects going on when we look at strength training. So for probably the more advanced lifter, it allows you to focus more on that pure strength and doing sort of heavier lifts. So you're working at a higher percentage of their 1RM. So they might be doing sets of 3, sets of 4, even sets of 2 potentially, to really work those heavy loads and train their body to activate high threshold motor units and apply a lot of force. Whereas if I was to do that with a beginner client who has said, I want to work on strength, or they haven't been really developed that foundation of muscle mass and coordination and stability, putting them into a training program with sort of higher volumes of sort of 2 or 3 rep sets is just going to increase their risk of injury, and then probably not going to get the benefits that, say, someone is who has been training for a longer period of time and built up sort of a base level of muscle mass that they can then start to train that nervous system and really build that strength at the same time. So there's going to be different focuses, and I think that's important to consider when you look at, okay, my client wants to develop strength, how do I do it? And it's really how you probably proportion out hypertrophy based sets and reps and training volume versus how much actual strength training am I going to do. Where I'm doing, say, sets of 4 with 3 or 4 minutes rest, or sets of 3 with 3 or 4 minutes rest, and sort of building volume at the heavy end, versus I'm doing maybe 1 or 2 sets that's slightly heavier, and then I might do some more sets where there's more volume and we're more trying to increase muscle mass, build coordination, and build our general strength. So over a period of time, as my training age grows, or as the client's training age grows, I've developed some stability. I've sort of gone through some bilateral unilateral lifts. So my tendons and joint stiffness is really, really good as well, because that's also going to affect strength. So you really want to make sure you're building through a solid progress and a client has a solid foundation before we would go into, say, a real strength-orientated program that has them doing heavy lifts, whether it's heavy singles, heavy doubles, and needing lots of recovery. You're really going to have to build up all the other skills and those that general foundation of muscle mass before you move on to that. So, interesting topic. If you've got any thoughts on strength development, it's something that you've thought about doing, and it sort of leads towards, I guess, powerlifting competitions and things. If you've got any thoughts, send an email to tom@afa.com.au. But just an interesting topic to consider, how we train, and when some clients say, I want to do strength, how do we incorporate that while still giving them the benefit of, okay, well, we need to have some sort of hypertrophy training in there. What does it mean for our lifts? What does it mean for the exercises we're selecting? All sorts of stuff can go into it, but just something I want to get you guys thinking about. If you've got thoughts, or you want me to cover something else in greater detail, or something you want to hear more about, send me an email as well, so I can follow it up. Other than that, guys, I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you all soon.